High in the Himalayas, where the air is thin and the mountains pierce the sky, lies Ladakh. This remote region, often referred to as the land of high passes, is a place where nature's grandeur is on full display. The towering peaks and expansive landscapes create a sense of awe and wonder, drawing adventurers and spiritual seekers alike. This region, a part of India's Jammu and Kashmir, is a land of stark beauty. The rugged terrain, with its dramatic contrasts of barren mountains and lush valleys, offers a visual feast for those who venture here. The interplay of light and shadow across the landscape creates a constantly changing tapestry of colors and textures. Towering peaks cast long shadows over desolate valleys. These mountains, some of the highest in the world, stand as silent sentinels, guarding the secrets of this ancient land. The valleys below, though seemingly desolate, are home to a rich tapestry of life, both human and animal. Icy rivers carve their way through the rugged terrain. These rivers, fed by melting glaciers, are the lifeblood of the region, providing water for both people and wildlife. In winter they freeze over, creating a stark, otherworldly landscape that is both beautiful and forbidding. It is a place of ancient trade routes and Buddhist monasteries. For centuries, Ladakh has been a crossroads of cultures, where traders and pilgrims from across Asia have met and mingled. The region's monasteries, perched on high cliffs and hidden in remote valleys, are centers of spiritual life and learning. But Ladakh's serene landscape belies a turbulent reality. Beneath the surface of this tranquil land lies a history of conflict and struggle, as different powers have vied for control of this strategic region. Ladakh is at the heart of a long-standing border dispute between India and China. This dispute, which dates back to the mid-20th century, has its roots in the complex history of the region and the competing territorial claims of the two nations. This dispute has flared up in recent years, raising tensions between the world's two most populous nations. Incidents of border clashes and military standoffs have become more frequent, as both sides seek to assert their claims and protect their interests. The bone of contention is the Line of Actual Control, or LAC. This line, which serves as the de facto border between India and China, is poorly defined and often disputed. The lack of a clear boundary has led to frequent misunderstandings and confrontations. This poorly defined line serves as the de facto border. The ambiguity of the LAC has created a volatile situation where even minor incidents can escalate into major conflicts. Both sides have established military outposts and patrols along the line, further increasing the risk of confrontation. However, both sides have differing perceptions of where it lies. These differing perceptions are rooted in historical maps and treaties, as well as the strategic interests of both nations. The lack of a mutually agreed-upon boundary has made it difficult to resolve the dispute through diplomatic means. The high altitude and harsh climate make Ladakh one of the most challenging battlefields on Earth. The thin air and extreme temperatures pose significant challenges for both soldiers and equipment, making it a true test of endurance and resilience. Military outposts are perched precariously on mountaintops. These outposts, often located in remote and inaccessible areas, are manned by soldiers who must endure harsh conditions and isolation for extended periods of time. Troops face freezing temperatures, altitude sickness, and logistical nightmares. The harsh environment takes a toll on both physical and mental health, making it one of the most demanding postings for any soldier. The unforgiving terrain adds another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. The rugged mountains and deep valleys make movement and communication difficult, further complicating military operations. The dispute over Ladakh is not just about territory, it is also about the strategic importance of the region, which serves as a gateway to Central Asia, and a key point of access to vital resources and trade routes. It is about national pride, strategic influence, and the balance of power in Asia. Both India and China see control of Ladakh as crucial to their regional and global ambitions, making the dispute a matter of national security and prestige. As India and China continue to modernize their militaries and assert themselves on the global stage, the stakes in Ladakh are higher than ever. The ongoing military buildup and technological advancements have increased the potential for conflict, making the situation more precarious. This frozen battlefield is a microcosm of the larger geopolitical competition between two giants. The struggle for control of Ladakh reflects the broader rivalry between India and China, as both nations seek to expand their influence and secure their interests in an increasingly multipolar world. The roots of the India-China border dispute can be traced back centuries. This complex and multifaceted issue has its origins in the ancient interactions between the two civilizations, long before the modern concept of nation-states emerged. The Himalayas, while a formidable natural barrier, have not completely separated these two ancient civilizations. These towering mountains have been both a bridge and a barrier, shaping the history and culture of the region. Trade routes crisscrossed the mountains, facilitating cultural exchange, but also leading to territorial ambiguities. These routes were lifelines for traders and pilgrims, connecting the Indian subcontinent with the Tibetan plateau and beyond. The very concept of a defined border in the modern sense was largely absent in pre-colonial times. The people of the region lived in a fluid landscape where boundaries were often marked by natural features rather than political lines. The arrival of European powers, particularly the British in the 19th century, brought with it the imposition of Western notions of territorial sovereignty. The British, with their cartographic zeal, sought to map and control the vast and diverse territories of their empire. The British, in their attempts to secure their Indian empire, sought to define their northern frontiers. This was a strategic move to protect their interests against other colonial powers and the perceived threat from the north. This led to a series of agreements and treaties, often with the involvement of the Tibetan authorities, who then exercised a degree of autonomy from China. Tibet at that time was a significant player in the region with its own political and cultural influence. However, these agreements were often vague and open to interpretation. The lack of precise demarcation and the differing perceptions of the involved parties sowed the seeds of future disputes. Maps were drawn, redrawn, and disputed. Each side had its own version of the border, leading to a complex web of claims and counterclaims that would persist for decades. The McMahon Line, proposed by British Administrator Henry McMahon in 1914, sought to define the eastern section of the border between Tibet and what was then British India. This line was intended to provide a clear boundary, but it was not universally accepted. China, however, has consistently rejected the validity of this line. The Chinese government viewed it as an imperial imposition and refused to recognize it as a legitimate boundary. Following India's independence in 1947 and the Communist Revolution in China in 1949, the border issue took on a new urgency. Both nations were in the process of defining their identities and securing their territories. Both newly independent nations, eager to assert their sovereignty and secure their borders, inherited the legacy of these unresolved territorial ambiguities. The border, once a distant and somewhat abstract concept, became a focal point of national pride and security. This set the stage for decades of mistrust, military standoffs, and, ultimately, war. The border dispute has led to several confrontations, including the Sino-Indian War of 1962, and continues to be a flashpoint in the relationship between the two countries. The legacy of these historical complexities still influences the geopolitics of the region today, making the India-China border dispute one of the most enduring and challenging issues in international relations. The year 1962 saw the border dispute between India and China erupt into a full-blown war. This conflict, often referred to as the Sino-Indian War, was a significant event in the history of both nations. It was a brief but intense confrontation that left an indelible mark on the geopolitical landscape of Asia. This conflict, brief but brutal, had a profound impact on the relationship between the two countries. The war not only resulted in significant loss of life and resources, but also altered the course of their diplomatic and military strategies for decades to come. It also left a lasting legacy of mistrust and suspicion. The scars of the 1962 war are still visible today, influencing the way India and China perceive each other and interact on the global stage. The border dispute remains unresolved, and the shadow of the past continues to loom large over their bilateral relations. The war was triggered by a complex interplay of factors, including differing perceptions of the border, domestic political pressures, and the geopolitical dynamics of the Cold War. The boundary between India and China, known as the McMahon Line, was a major point of contention. Both nations had different interpretations of where the border lay, leading to frequent skirmishes and escalating tensions. India, under Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, had adopted a policy of non-alignment. Nehru's vision was to keep India neutral in the Cold War, avoiding entanglement in the rivalries between the United States and the Soviet Union. However, this policy was put to the test as relations with China began to sour. However, India's relations with China had been deteriorating for years. Despite initial efforts to foster friendship and cooperation, including the famous Panchsheel Agreement of 1954, the two countries found themselves at odds over several issues. The border dispute was the most prominent among them, but there were also ideological differences and regional rivalries at play. Border skirmishes became increasingly common. These small-scale clashes were often sparked by patrols encountering each other in disputed areas. Each incident added to the growing tension, making a larger conflict seem almost inevitable. China, meanwhile, under the leadership of Mao Zedong, was dealing with internal challenges and saw an opportunity to assert its dominance in Asia. Mao's China was undergoing significant social and economic upheaval, and a decisive military victory could serve to bolster national unity and demonstrate strength to both domestic and international audiences. The war itself lasted for a month, and was fought along the disputed eastern and western sectors of the border. The harsh and rugged terrain of the Himalayas posed significant challenges for both sides. The high altitudes and severe weather conditions made combat operations extremely difficult and dangerous. Chinese forces, better equipped and prepared for the harsh conditions, made significant advances into Indian territory. Their superior logistics and preparation allowed them to outmaneuver the Indian forces, capturing key positions and inflicting heavy casualties. India, caught off guard, struggled to respond effectively. The Indian military was not adequately prepared for a high-altitude war, and the lack of infrastructure and supplies further hampered their efforts. The initial shock of the Chinese advances led to a chaotic and disorganized defense. The war ended with a unilateral ceasefire declared by China. On November 21, 1962, China announced a ceasefire and withdrew its troops to pre-war positions. This sudden end to the conflict left many questions unanswered and did little to resolve the underlying issues. However, the political fallout of the 1962 war continues to this day. The war had a profound impact on India's national psyche, leading to a re-evaluation of its defense and foreign policies. The sense of vulnerability and betrayal felt by the Indian public and leadership has had lasting repercussions. The conflict shattered India's sense of security and led to a significant increase in military spending. In the years following the war, India undertook major reforms to modernize and strengthen its armed forces. The experience of 1962 underscored the need for a robust and well-prepared military to safeguard national interests. It also had a deep impact on India's foreign policy, pushing it closer to the Soviet Union. The war highlighted the limitations of non-alignment and prompted India to seek stronger alliances. The Soviet Union emerged as a key partner, providing military and economic support in the years that followed. For China, the war solidified its control over the Aksai-Chin region, but also fueled accusations of expansionism. The conflict reinforced China's determination to secure its borders and assert its territorial claims, but it also drew international criticism and suspicion. The legacy of the 1962 war continues to shape the strategic calculations and diplomatic interactions of both nations.